What does it really mean to build trust with Chinese partners? And how is that different from the Western approach?
Well, you know, when I say, or when you say trust, it means can we trust a Chinese supplier, right? There are even books about that. But have we considered to what extent that the Chinese might be thinking, can we trust those foreigners? And Chinese people even have a difficulty in trusting each other because it's extremely competitive. So if you're outside of a circle, right? If you're a stranger lying on the street, we would rather not touch you because it could cause trouble. Because you may actually use the fact that I try to help you to get something from me. This is real case, sadly. On the other hand, I noticed this when you marry a family or when you marry a company, right? You become part of a company. You are supposed to do things which go way beyond what we would be willing to do for somebody else, because there is this sense of collective responsibility. It comes with responsibility if you have a certain relationship. Now, that sounds very complicated, but what does that mean, right? It means that it really is incredibly hard to just enter in a trust relationship if you go and visit China during a tour and shake hands and say hello and try and negotiate a contract. Because you're no different from the person lying on the street, okay? So it basically is, can I now sell something to you? And I don't care what happens after that. And this is especially relevant now in a situation where there are so many integrators, there's so much overcapacity, where there are so many players that are really short-term. They're not going to be there next year, or they don't intend to be there next year, or they only are looking for a commission. So they're not looking for trust, right? So on the other hand, there are integrators. There are a couple of them that are really good, that know what they're doing, that also have a long-term strategy, and you can build a trust relationship with them because they're going to be there. But still, you're not going to have that trust simply by visiting them. Now, it took me 3 years in China to suddenly feel very lonely and feel I don't have any friends, because I thought that everything was transactional. So I had the feeling that everybody is wanting something from me, or everything is like transactional. But it's only then that I realized that this transactional way of thinking is simply part of the culture, because that's how it is. There's nothing wrong with it, because there is also this sense of accountability, responsibility. Yes, I'm expecting something for you, but you can expect the same from me. I will basically have my responsibility to you. And that is so different in China compared to, I can only speak of Europe in the best way because I'm from Europe. So there's a lot of people that are entitled to something here. People always feel I'm entitled to this, I have the right of this. And in China, it's like, well, it's my responsibility for this, to do this. So I can have a responsibility as a father, as an employee, as a boss, as a peer, as a husband. Now, what does that mean in practice? So if you enter China, I always say, I look at 3 levels. Level 1 really is, where are the needs? That's the 5-year plan. What is the country trying to do? Because this is where the wind is gonna blow. Everybody in China knows that, because it's a central plan economy. So it determines the wind, right? It determines where are the opportunities. The second thing is the regional layer, right? So which part in the country is responsible for what? So some parts of the country are going to become battery manufacturing hubs. Other parts of the country are going to be mines. Other parts of the country are going to be innovation hubs. So, which also means that at their level, in their policies, they're going to get support to develop these economies, and they're going to be able to support companies to develop these industries. And they're also going to have employees present there because they know there's going to be employment there. And this typically is actually built upon the needs of the central level, seeing where, for example, employment should go up and things like that, where industries have to be upgraded and so ever. And also the geopolitical aspects, of course, where do we compete and so on. But below that level, once you know where the wind blows, which part of the industry is going to be supported, then the next level is, where do I have real connections, right, with one of the three players? And the three players are, again, local government, local industry, local company or startup or large company, but also local institute, information. Because the institutes, they systematically collect data which systematically is shared in the local ecosystem to companies leveraging that. This is also why, for example, China now is getting so much acceleration from the AI, because AI solutions are being provided to optimize all kind of industrial processes, but not only industrial processes, even value chain improvements and ecosystem collaborations, policy developments. So China even has, for example, can you imagine this? Carbon maturity indices for each city. What is the carbon maturity of each city with regard to how well is the industry developed, how well is the city organized with regard to infrastructure, with regard to the business district, the living district, and the transportation between them, but also with regard to how well it is being implemented and how mature the city is with regard to, is this an aging part or not? So they have carbon indices, and based on that, carbon maturity indices, based on that, they identify where are the needs and the opportunities for the city and for the industry to develop. They basically are already selling this to countries in Africa. So that's why Africa is leapfrogging based on data available in China and system thinking available in China. And in Europe, we are basically debating whether we can trust a system coming from the national grid, because I know projects where the national grid is selling the equipment and 30% of the investment in projects, and they're bringing their own safety people, they're bringing their own EPC people, but they need to work with the local EPCers and the local grid providers to make sure that they are locally compliant. So anyway, here there's a lot of debate on whether this is desirable or not. But if you look at where the value is, of course, you need to have cybersecurity, you need to protect that, but there's a lot of potential value. So I come back to the three levels, right? Where the wind blows. The second level is where the regional hubs are, the hotspots. And then the third level is where of the three players, government, institute, and industry, you have someone with connections with. You have connections with. Now, if you have a direct connection yourself, it's perfect. And it costs time to build this. I spent 20 years building several relationships I have now in several parts of the country, several industries, but only there. Outside of those, I'm just a Lawai, just a foreigner. But I know a lot of Chinese, and if I, for example, now need to go to an area where I don't have connections, I would never go there without looking at who do I know that has a connection there with one of those three players. Because the entrance is one of these three players. And the way to enter that is via one connection that you have with those one of three players. So if you have a solution where you can match the need and the opportunity with one local industrial player, that is endorsed by the local government because they need to build this, develop this. Then you're going to be allowed to step into the ecosystem. You're going to leverage that data, that insight from the institute, and you're going to build a business model. Now, this business model is not a business model you're going to have to market in China, because it's going to be marketed for you. Because China doesn't have Facebook, but they have WeChat and they have other social media where these examples, they have policies at the national level and at the provincial level where they are looking for champions and champion models, and they get identified and they get subsidized, they get supported. And when one model works in one part of the country with one local company, you're going to notice that the governments and the companies from other regions are going to call you. Hey, Johnny, we know that you're doing this. Can you also come and do this here? We know how the market works here. And the local company will have its own needs and opportunities. The local governments will have its own objectives and challenges. And the local institutes will have the relevant data sets coming with that. So it will be implemented, replicated, but in a local way. So this is the way how you can go incredibly fast in the Chinese market. This is how I've seen it several times over and over again in China. But you must know that the Chinese ecosystem is thinking like this. And now they're moving this overseas. So if you understand this and you can become part of this very big machine, which is China, it is what it is, you're going to have the leverage of that very big machine for faster innovation, for acceleration to market access, not only in China, but also overseas. But you have to remember the same thing. What are the needs and the opportunities from the companies you're dealing with? What are the large policies they need to abide with? Because that is where they get support. Large Chinese companies get government funding to develop certain technologies. This is a wet dream for most of the European companies to get this kind of support. So anyway, whether you want it or not, you're going to have to learn it, because 15 years ago, I used to say, we all speak English. I'm speaking with you English. You're from Lithuania. Arthur is from Austria or from Germany?
He's based in Switzerland.
Switzerland. Okay, I'm sorry, Arthur. So anyway, what I'm we're all speaking English, and I'm sure we've eaten fries before, right? So I like fries. We know hamburgers, we know fries, we know English. But that's because of what has been developed over the last 100 years. Why? Simply because it was a large party in the world with a large GDP having a very big impact on the market, like local GDP, global GDP. Now, this is simply replicating, it's repeating, but with a different player, with a larger GDP, faster developing, and who for the first time in this 5-year plan has set its intentions beyond China. The last 5-year plan they were studying beyond China, now they are planning to go beyond China. In the same way, like in 2005 and 2010, I showed this in China, I talked about this. They were looking at how does the environment look like in China? The 5 years later, where's the industry impacting the environment? And then 5 years later, okay, how can we deal with that? So they simply implement that. So if you're planning to do business in the world and you're not looking at China's 5-year plan, you are basically having a gap in your own strategy.
Thank you, Johnny. That's well said. Good insights.